Hi, I'm Stephen Majors with the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. I'm here at ARM Studios with Julia Jenkins, the board president of EveryLife Foundation. Julia, it's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And let's just get started with basic question. What is EveryLife Foundation and how did it get its start?
Sure. So the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases actually turns 15 next March, or actually next February. And I started at the foundation shortly after that in March. And we really were looking to unite the rare disease patient community around the shared regulatory challenges that we're facing rare diseases and really preventing rare disease drugs from being developed. So 15 years ago, we didn't even use the C word, cures, right? Gene and cell therapies weren't really even in development, right? There was people that were trying to start it, but it wasn't really happening. There was very few companies were even focused in rare disease. So at that time, you have to remember Google wasn't very advanced, Facebook wasn't very advanced. So the patient community really didn't understand how the investment process for rare diseases work, how the regulatory process was really preventing therapies from being developed. Rare disease companies didn't have government relations people in Washington, D.C., so very different times. So this is actually a really exciting time, not just for cell and gene therapies, but for rare disease in general, because there's not only the possibility of cures, but there are real treatments now for our patient community.
And so after 15 years of at least some progress, what are the biggest priorities that your organization is spending its time on right now?
Sure. So we were founded to really address three things in the regulatory process. We wanted the FDA to understand rare diseases, understand the unique needs of the patient community, of developers, understand small clinical trial designs. We wanted the use for alternative clinical trial designs, and we wanted access to the accelerated approval pathway through the use of biomarkers. Those are three fights we are still fighting to this day, but it's a completely different ballgame because people actually know what we're talking about, right? People know what accelerated approval pathway are. People understand how clinical trials work. People understand how the FDA works. We are now also working to ensure patients get a timely access to diagnosis. We just launched our most recent economic burden study, putting a price tag on the diagnostic odyssey. And you can find more about that at everylifefoundation.org. I'll give ourselves a plug. But really looking at, the focus is so much on the cost of bringing these therapies to market, the cost on the healthcare system. But we never talk about the cost of living with a rare disease. And we actually did our first economic burden study in 2019. We found that the cost of just 379 of the 10,000 rare diseases was nearly $1 trillion in the US. And most of that cost falls on our families. So really when we think about what is important, it's educating about the true needs of our community and how these treatments don't just save a life, they can actually save money too.
And so we might have up to 5 rare disease gene therapy approvals in 2023 alone. So I guess 15 years ago, could you have ever envisioned that happening? I guess one question. And then where do we go from here? What are your hopes for gene therapy? What are some of your concerns?
I would like to say yes. We always dreamed of a cure, even though we didn't use the C word because we don't want to give our community false hope. And I still feel like some people feel like gene therapy might be false hope because there's only 5 and there's 10,000 rare diseases. So how do we get from 5 to even 1,000? And how do families pay for it? And that's just in the US. When you go look internationally, the access issues are a huge barrier. We haven't figured that out yet.
Right. lot of work to do there. Stepping back, how did you get involved in this work? I mean, why are you doing this instead of, many of other things you could be doing?
Sure. Well, I lost a cousin to Duchenne muscular dystrophy, so I definitely celebrated recently with the amazing news for the Duchenne community. I broke down in tears the first time I saw the little boys rolling around the floor and then jumping up and playing. That just does not happen and would not have been possible without that gene therapy. So that is really exciting. But again, 15 years in this space and actually more, I have so many other families that I'm connected to. And obviously, I lost my, I'm older, so I lost my cousin a long, long time ago. But to see that for Duchenne gives so many other families hope, and there's so much possibility. One of my good friends / parent advocate, she's a mom. She started her own biotech company and is working to develop a gene therapy. It's an exciting time, but there's, again, lots of work to be done.
And can you talk a little bit about the process for a parent of a child with a rare disease, what that looks like from trying to figure out what disease it is all the way through to trying to figure out what treatments might be out there?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in rare disease, every rock falls in the parents' or the patient's backpack. If you get diagnosed with cancer, there's so many different cancer organizations. But most of the time when you get a rare disease diagnosis, if you're lucky enough, the average time is 6 years to get a diagnosis. The best case scenario, you get a diagnosis in 6 years. So when you're lucky enough to get a diagnosis and that the parents themselves and the patients have to fight to get that diagnosis, then they have to start their own nonprofit. They have to find the researchers. They have to raise the money to fund the research. Then they have to convince the biotech money to take their research to the next level. Then they have to work with the FDA to get the drug approved. And now the patient community is being asked to work to get the payers to pay for it. So everything falls onto the patient community in rare disease.
So Julia, tell us, what can companies do in the regenerative medicine advanced therapy space to get patients more involved in the process from start to finish?
One of the things that didn't exist when we started the foundation 15 years ago was patient-focused drug development. That was passed in 2012 in the PDUFA reauthorization, and the FDA's issued guidances about how to incorporate patient perspectives in the drug development process. And companies are still learning how to do this, and it's a really exciting time to really work with patients to design clinical trials, to work with patients to determine the best measures for the disease. And I think this is one of the things that is going to really help bring novel treatments forward. There's a lot of talk about the need to diversify clinical trials, but if we aren't working with patients from diverse communities in the very beginning to give input and help design that trial, you're never going to be able to recruit those underserved minority communities to trials. So the next hope, the next plan for EveryLife, and I hope for all of industry, is really to make a commitment to patient engagement, to really engaging patients in every part of the drug development and approval process.
Well, thanks, Julia. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you stopping by our studios and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.